This had been his dream for so long. Today was the day. He had spent weeks prepping and mapping out a route, and now bunches of helium-filled weather balloons floated overhead, tugging on the lawn chair. Larry strapped on his parachute and sat down. His ground crew watched, recording with a video camera. This was it. He cut the first rope and slowly rose to hover over the roof of the house. Perfect. Liftoff was progressing exactly like he'd planned. Suddenly, a strong gust of wind whipped past, rocking Larry and snapping the second line, tethering the lawn chair to the ground. Whoops! Larry shot up into the sky like he was being launched out of a cannon. Uh-oh, this wasn't part of the plan. Larry Walters had always dreamed of flying. At 13, he went to an Army-Navy surplus store and saw weather balloons on display. This inspired his idea of filling a bunch of weather balloons with helium, attaching them to a chair, and floating off into the sky. Unable to afford flight lessons, teenage Larry spent a lot of time hanging out at the local airport doing odd jobs. As a young man, Larry joined the Air Force, planning to become a pilot, but was rejected due to his poor eyesight. In the spring of 1982, 33-year-old Larry was living in Los Angeles, California, and working as a truck driver for a television commercial production company. He had never forgotten his weather balloon idea from some 20 years earlier. Now was the time to do it, he decided. Larry came up with a plan. He would launch from his girlfriend Carol Van Dusen's house in San Pedro, rise to an altitude of around 6,000 or 7,000 feet, drift northeast, heading over the San Gabriel Mountains, and eventually land in the Mojave Desert around 120 miles away. Larry and Carol spent over $4,000 to purchase 45 weather balloons, 55 helium tanks, a lawn chair, a CB radio set, and a BB pellet gun. To purchase the unusually large number of balloons and helium cylinders, Larry falsified documents from his employer saying the balloons were for a television commercial. During the planning stage, several weeks before his fateful trip, Larry's pal Ron Richland talked him into taking a skydiving class. After the class, Larry ended up buying a parachute. Though Carol and Ron tried to talk Larry out of what they felt was a dangerous, wacky plan many times, they agreed to be his flight crew. The night before his planned flight was spent inflating 42 8-foot weather balloons one by one. Around midnight, the curious police noticed the huge clusters of balloons hovering over the house and dropped by to inquire what was happening. Once again, Larry claimed they were preparing to shoot a commercial. Friday, July 2nd, 1982. Dawn's hot, sunny, and clear, perfect for a balloon ride. Larry dubs his trusty lawn chair Inspiration 1. The weather balloons are tethered to the lawn chair with nylon cables in 6 tiers, rising almost 180 feet high. Over 21-gallon jugs of water are attached to either side of the lawn chair to serve as a ballast. There is no seatbelt, but the chair is positioned so Larry sits in it leaning back at an angle, making it hard to tip forward and fall out. The whole contraption is tethered to the ground via guide wires wrapped around Larry's Jeep. On board, Larry plans to carry several items to aid in his trip, including an altimeter, a compass, a 35mm camera, a BB gun, a map, and a small emergency kit. He even has some jerky, sandwiches, and a 2-liter bottle of Coke for snacks. Just before takeoff, Larry ends up delaying his flight by 45 minutes so his friend can go buy him a life jacket just in case he drifts near the ocean. Around 10:30 a.m., after putting on his parachute and getting comfortable in the chair, Larry cuts the first rope. He rises, hovering over the roof of Carol's house. Perfect. The first part of his plan is to float 100 feet over the house for half an hour, while his ground crew notifies the Federal Aviation Administration or FAA and local airports, and then drift off toward the mountains. But a sudden rush of wind prematurely snaps the second tether, jolting Larry and sending the lawn chair skyrocketing upward so fast Larry's glasses slide off his face. Larry is ascending somewhere between 800 and 1,000 feet a minute. He contacts Carol on the CB and tells her that he lost his glasses. Nearly hysterical, she yells for him to come down since he can't see, but Larry is prepared and has brought a second pair of glasses. He let Carol know and also tells her that he's headed into a small fog bank. Luckily, he comes through the other side without issue. As Larry rises, the view is fantastic. In the distance over the houses, streets, and freeways, he can see the famed ship, the Queen Mary, at the port. As he continues to soar, he can see the curve of the California coastline, the Pacific Ocean, and then eventually Catalina Island in the distance. He watches a private plane fly past beneath him. He enjoys the view, but forgets to take pictures. In fact, for the duration of his voyage, Larry totally forgets to use his camera. To put in perspective how quickly Larry is ascending, in less than a minute, Larry has reached 500 feet and officially entered into federal airspace. In less than 2 minutes, Larry has risen higher than the 1,250-foot Empire State Building. In about 10 minutes, he's almost at 10,000 feet, or 1/3 the way up Mount Everest. All the while, an agitated Carol talks to Larry on the CB. She says that they found his dropped glasses and pleads for him to come down. Larry tries to reassure her, but he's been dreaming of this day for so long to give up so easy. Around 15,000 feet, Larry starts to worry. How high can he float? Later, the FAA will tell him that he could have reached 50,000 feet and turned into a popsicle. A concerned Larry carefully begins shooting balloons with his BB gun. Finally, the Inspiration 1 levels out at around 16,500 feet, just over 3 miles off the ground, far higher than Larry originally intended to float. Along with this amazing view, Larry now has several problems. For humans, altitude sickness typically begins around 8,000 feet. At twice that altitude, Larry is experiencing oxygen levels comparable to a climber on a high mountain peak. He grows dizzy and his thinking is affected. Furthermore, it's really cold. The average temperature at 16,000 feet is 5 degrees Fahrenheit. Yet, though his extremities are beginning to grow numb with cold since he's closer to the sun with no shade, Larry is also working on a sunburn. However, most dangerously, Larry is at an altitude commercial planes pass through. Even worse, the Inspiration 1 begins to drift west toward the open ocean and directly into the flight corridor of the nearby Los Angeles International Airport. Larry calls in a mayday on his CB radio. His distress call is picked up by the Crest Radio Emergency Associated Communication Team, or Crest React, in Corona, California. The operator is puzzled and skeptical of Larry's claim that he's floating over 16,000 feet in the sky via weather balloons. Nevertheless, members of Crest React continue to communicate by CB with Larry for the duration of his flight, eventually becoming convinced that it isn't a hoax. Meanwhile, Larry is spotted by pilots of 2 different TWA and Delta flights, who radio the LAX tower and FAA. At first, the tower is incredulous, but then they plot a radar fix on Larry and begin tracking him. By this time, Larry has shot out 7 balloons and is planning to shoot more when a gust of wind pushes the chair sideways. The BB gun, which has been resting on Larry's lap, slips. Larry watches in disbelief as the gun falls, growing smaller and smaller until it's completely out of sight. Just like that, Larry has lost his main method for descending. Luckily, the loss of helium from the popped balloons is enough to cause Larry to begin to descend. Over about an hour, he slowly floats back to Earth. At about 2,000 feet, Larry begins to pick up speed and falls more quickly. To lighten the load, he uses a penknife to slash his ballast jugs and sends several gallons of water cascading down. As Larry gets closer to the ground, for the first time, he really gets scared. He's afraid he'll land on a power line and get electrocuted or crash through someone's roof. He tries to steer the chair toward a wide open space, a golf course at a country club, but he can't change direction. All this time, Larry's periodically been in touch with his ground crew. They call 911 and local police begin tracking Larry. Larry's worst fears are realized when Inspiration 1 crashes into and gets entangled in high-voltage power lines in someone's yard. Luckily, the plastic cord Larry's using saved him from being electrocuted. Larry has to wait, dangling only 5 feet off the ground while firemen and utility crews cut the electricity to the lines. This blacks out a Long Beach neighborhood for 20 minutes. Ultimately, Larry's flight lasts a few hours, takes him 3 miles into the sky, but only carries him from San Pedro to Long Beach, the next city over from its launch site, a distance of around 10 miles, before returning him safely to Earth. As Larry finally climbs down, he's swarmed by excited children from the neighborhood. Everyone's coming out to see what the big commotion is about. Larry autographs a few pieces of balloon and impulsively gives away his lawn chair to a boy, a move he later regrets when the Smithsonian asks him about donating his lawn chair. Some years later, the lawn chair is found and in 2014 loaned for an exhibition to the San Diego Air and Space Museum. Just after landing, Larry's arrested by waiting officers of the Long Beach Police Department. As he's placed in a squad car in handcuffs, a reporter asks him why he's done it. Larry casually says, "A man can't just sit around." Eventually, the police let Larry go. There's nothing they can hold him for. Larry makes the rounds in the media, having struck a chord with the public. Everyone is eager to interview the man who's fulfilled a crazy dream. Larry appears on popular late-night talk shows, The Tonight Show, where he's interviewed by Johnny Carson. He's also flown to New York to be on Late Night with David Letterman. Larry finds out that he's broken the altitude record for gas-filled clustered balloons, though his distinction is unofficial since he was unlicensed and unsanctioned. The FAA fines Larry $4,000 for violations under U.S. federal aviation regulations, including operating an aircraft within an airport traffic area without establishing and maintaining two-way communications with the control tower. Larry appeals, and ultimately the fine is reduced to $1,500. Larry has inspired several copycats around the world who have embarked on wild flights using homemade airships of their own. Of this trip, Larry said, "It was something I had to do. I had this dream for 20 years, and if I hadn't done it, I think I would have ended up in the funny farm." What's a dream of yours that you've achieved or hope to achieve? Do any of you have one as wild as floating into the sky with balloons? Let us know in the comments. Now go watch our other video, Plane Crash Leads to Unbelievable Survival Story. Thanks for watching, and as always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. See you next time.